the role of the gatekeeper of the temple? This is the question we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of 1 Chronicles on Walking Through the Bible.
The glory of his cross.
Today we're going to be discussing 1 Chronicles chapter 9, verses 17 to 27. But before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to 1 Chronicles chapter 9, verse 17. But if you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, 1 Chronicles chapter 9, beginning at verse 17. And the gatekeepers were Shallum, Akub, Talmon, and Ahiman, and their brethren. Shallum was the chief. Until then they had been gatekeepers for the camps of the children of Levi at the king's gate on the east. Shallum the son of Kor, the son of Abiasaph, the son of Korah, and his brethren from his father's house, the Korathites, who were in charge of the work of the service, gatekeepers of the tabernacle. Their fathers had been keepers of the entrance to the camp of the Lord. And Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, had been the officer over them in time past. The Lord was with him. Zechariah, the son of Meshelmiah, was the keeper of the door of the tabernacle of meeting. All those chosen as gatekeepers were 212. They were recorded by their genealogy in their villages. David and Samuel the seer had appointed them to their trusted office. So they and their children were in charge of the gates of the house of the Lord, the house of the tabernacle, by assignment. The gatekeepers were assigned to the four directions, the east, west, north, and south. And their brethren in their villages had to come with them from time to time for 7 days. For in this trusted office were four chief gatekeepers. They were Levites, and they had charge over the chambers and the treasuries of the house of God. And they lodged all around the house of God because they had the responsibility, and they were in charge of opening it every morning. In this chapter, following the list of the genealogies of Israel, the chronicler turns to the time following captivity. That doesn't mean that the rest of the book will take us from this time on, for even the end of this chapter will flip us back in time over 600 years. Rather, what is being done here is the chronicler is introducing us to the temple worship that would begin following the captivity as well as its origins. He began by telling us that there was a remnant that returned from captivity. Some of this remnant settled in Jerusalem and the surrounding region. Among those would be the priests, Levites, and the helpers of the temple. Of course, the priests and the Levites had been ordained to their work all the way back in the days of Moses, but the organization of the temple worship was really done in earnest, as we see here, during the days of Samuel and David. It's not that there wasn't structure before this, but with the proposed building of the temple in Jerusalem, there would be more things to do, and thus more organization was required. In this section, the chronicler gives us some more of the duties of the Levites. One of those duties were the gatekeepers. Now, with the temple, we don't think of things like gates and guards, but just like the cities, there were people in charge of opening the doors of the temple grounds, the temple itself, as well as ensure that people didn't go where they shouldn't. For instance, only the priests on duty were allowed to go into the temple structure to do their work. Nobody else should be going in there. Thus, it would be a keeper at the entrance of the temple or tabernacle that would not only open and close the doors, but would ensure that unauthorized people didn't go in. Why was this important? Because back in Leviticus 10, God struck down Nadab and Abihu for offering unauthorized fire before the Lord. Likewise, God gave instructions as to who could enter the temple structure itself. To disobey God would open one up to incur the wrath of God. And to my Christian friends today who believe that we're under grace, not under law today, and as such, God doesn't care so much about the commands anymore, think again. There isn't one God of the Old Testament and another God of the New Testament. He is the same God, the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Everyone who has ever been saved, as we learned in Romans, even those before Christ, were saved by grace through faith. That faith has to be a living faith, a faith that obeys God's commands and sought God's forgiveness when we failed. Abraham believed in God, and he believed God, so Abraham obeyed God. That is why Abraham was righteous. It was not based on his own doing. It was based on God's grace received through obedient faith. There is no room for the Christian to come along and say that if God revealed something, then I don't have to do it. Nor is there room for a Christian to say that God didn't reveal something, therefore God must approve of me doing it. If we want to know the mind of God, God has to reveal it to us, which he does in Scripture. To go beyond that is to speak presumptuously, something we shouldn't be in the habit of doing. Up on the screen now is a picture of what the temple would have looked like in the days of Solomon. As you can see, there are gates and doors all around the temple and temple court, including a gate for the king when the palace of Solomon had been right next door. The tabernacle, when it stood, wouldn't have had as many entrances and exits, but still would have required gatekeepers. Some of the house of Korah, the man from Numbers who led a rebellion against Moses and Aaron, had been given the task of gatekeepers. If you recall from chapter 6, others from the house of Korah were singers in the tabernacle, showing us the families of the Levites might be responsible in multiple areas. We're also told that although there had been gatekeepers, it seems from the beginning that it was during the days of David and Samuel that this was fully organized into schedules of when and for how long each group would remain on duty. Along with guarding the temple structure itself, there were also treasuries of the house of God, which would have included food and money given as offerings that needed to be guarded. So these men were in charge of that too. All in all, the chronicler is giving us a more in-depth look at the temple itself apart from the sacrifices, something that will hopefully teach us that there was more to temple worship under Moses than just sacrifices, just as there is more to being a Christian today than simply Sunday assembled worship. We'll conclude chapter 9, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of 1 Chronicles chapter 9, verses 28 to 44, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.